Sergeant Maya Reeves stood at attention in the morning heat of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, her boots planted firm on the dusty ground. The sun beat down on her shoulders, but she didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't give them the satisfaction. Around her, the men of Bravo Company whispered. Some laughed. Others just stared with arms crossed, their faces twisted in doubt. She's not going to make it, one of them muttered. Too small, said another. This isn't a game. This is combat infantry. She'll wash out in a week. Maya heard every word. She always did. But she kept her eyes forward, her jaw tight, her breathing steady. She had heard it all before. At basic training, at airborne school, at every single duty station she'd been assigned to in her 6 years of service. Too weak, too small, too female. It didn't matter that she'd scored higher than half the men on the physical fitness test. It didn't matter that she'd passed every qualification, every course, every trial they put in front of her. What mattered to them was what they saw. A woman who stood 5'5" and weighed 130 pounds. They didn't see a soldier. They saw a liability. Captain Dominic. Hayes stepped out of the command building, his expression hard as stone. He was a wall of a man, 6'3", with a squared jaw and eyes like flint. He'd been in the Army for 15 years, served 3 tours overseas, and earned more commendations than most soldiers dreamed of. He was also the one who fought hardest to keep women out of his unit. Listen up, Hayes barked, and the murmurs died instantly. We ship out to Afghanistan in 6 weeks. That means 6 weeks to turn this circus into a fighting force. I don't care what your last unit was like. I don't care what you think you know. Here, you do it my way or you don't do it at all. His gaze swept over the formation and landed on Maya. His lip curled just slightly. Some of you are here because the Army says you have to be, he continued, his voice dripping with barely concealed contempt. That doesn't mean you belong. It just means we have to deal with you until you prove you can't handle it. Maya felt the heat rise in her chest, but she kept her face neutral. She wouldn't give him the reaction he wanted. Hayes stepped closer, stopping directly in front of her. Sergeant Reeves, he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. You think you can keep up with my men? Yes, sir, Maya replied, her voice clear and strong. You think you can carry a wounded soldier out of a firefight? Yes, sir, Hayes smirked. We'll see. He turned back to the formation. First exercise, full combat load, 12-mile ruck march. You've got 60 seconds to gear up, move. The soldiers scattered like ants, rushing to grab their rucksacks and equipment. Maya moved with them, her hands quick and efficient as she strapped on her gear. 70 pounds of weight settled onto her back and shoulders. Body armor, helmet, rifle, ammunition, water, supplies. She'd carried this much before. She'd carry it again. But as she took her place in formation, she caught the looks from the others. Sergeant First Class Derek Chen, a broad-shouldered combat veteran, shook his head slowly. Specialist Jordan Mills, a cocky kid from Texas, grinned like he was watching a joke unfold. And then there was Staff Sergeant Kyle Brennan. Brennan was Hayes's right hand, a mountain of muscle with a reputation for being the toughest soldier in the company. He'd made it clear from day one that he didn't think women belonged in combat roles. He walked past Maya now, his eyes flicking over her with open disdain. Hope you brought bandages, he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. You're gonna need them. Maya didn't respond. She adjusted the straps on her ruck and stared straight ahead. The march began. For the first few miles, it was manageable. The pace was fast, but Maya kept up, her boots hitting the ground in rhythm with the others. The weight on her back dug into her shoulders, but she'd learned long ago to push past the pain. But then Hayes started making it harder. Double time, he shouted at mile 4. They ran. Maya's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. Sweat poured down her face and back, soaking through her uniform. Around her, some of the men started to struggle too, their breathing ragged, their steps uneven. But they weren't the ones being watched. Every time Hayes looked back, his eyes found her. Every time they passed a marker, he'd glance her way, waiting for her to fall. Waiting for her to quit. She didn't. At mile 8, Specialist Mills stumbled and fell to one knee. Chen grabbed his arm and hauled him up, and they kept moving. At mile 10, another soldier vomited on the side of the road and kept running. At mile 11, Maya's vision started to blur. Her shoulders were raw under the straps. Her feet throbbed in her boots. Every step felt like dragging herself through concrete, but she could see the finish line ahead. Just one more mile. She pushed harder. digging deep into that place inside herself that didn't know how to quit. The place that had gotten her through every challenge, every insult, every moment when someone told her she didn't belong. She crossed the finish line in the middle of the pack. Not first, but not last either. She dropped her ruck and bent over, hands on her knees, gasping for air. Around her, soldiers collapsed onto the ground, groaning and cursing. Hayes walked through the group, his expression unreadable. When he reached Maya, he stopped. "Surprised you made it," he said flatly. Maya straightened, meeting his eyes. "I told you I would, sir." For a moment something flickered across his face, maybe respect, maybe just annoyance. Then it was gone. "Don't get comfortable, Reeves," he said. That was the easy part. He walked away, leaving her standing there with burning muscles and a fire in her chest that wouldn't go out. As the sun set over Fort Bragg that evening, Maya sat alone in the barracks, wrapping her blistered feet. The other soldiers were at the mess hall, laughing and bonding over the brutal march. No one had invited her. She told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to serve, to prove she belonged. But deep down in the quiet moments it hurt, and she knew the hardest part was still ahead. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Maya's military career. Every day brought new tests, new challenges, new opportunities for her to fail in front of men who expected nothing less. Captain Hayes ran them through combat drills until their bodies gave out. Live fire exercises, close quarters battle training, vehicle operations, medical evacuation procedures. He pushed everyone hard, but Maya knew she was being pushed harder. When the other soldiers got a 5-minute break, she got 3. When they had to carry 60 pounds, she was handed 80. When they ran obstacle courses, Hayes stood at the hardest points, watching her with those cold eyes, waiting for her to fall. She never did, but it wasn't enough. In the chow hall, she sat alone. During downtime, the men gathered in groups that didn't include her. In training exercises, she was always the last one picked for a team, like a kid in gym class nobody wanted. Staff Sergeant Brennan made it worse. He seemed to take personal pleasure in undermining her at every turn. During a tactical planning session, he dismissed her suggestions without consideration. During firearms training, he accidentally bumped her station, throwing off her shot. During a team-building exercise, he partnered everyone up and left her standing alone until Hayes barked at him to fix it. "Guess I forgot you were there," Brennan said with a shrug and a smirk. "You're easy to miss." The other soldiers laughed. Maya didn't. 3 weeks before deployment, Hayes called the company together for a special training evolution, the Combat Readiness Test. It was the final evaluation before they shipped out, designed to simulate real combat conditions as closely as possible. "This is it," Hayes announced, his voice echoing across the training grounds. "Everything you've learned comes down to this. You'll be divided into squads. Each squad will complete a series of objectives while under simulated enemy fire. You'll navigate obstacles, perform casualty evacuations, and secure targets. Failure is not an option." He began calling out squad assignments. Maya listened as names were grouped together. Chen with Mills, Rodriguez with Palmer. Hayes was building teams based on compatibility, strength, experience. Then he got to her. "Reeves," Hayes said, pausing deliberately. "You're with Brennan's squad?" Maya's stomach dropped. Brennan's squad consisted of the biggest, strongest, most experienced soldiers in the company. They were also the ones who had given her the hardest time. Brennan caught her eye from across the formation and smiled. It wasn't friendly. The test began at dawn. Maya's squad moved through the course like a machine, fast, efficient, deadly. Brennan led from the front, barking orders, directing fire, pushing them forward. Maya kept pace, her rifle up, her eyes scanning for threats. When they hit the first obstacle, a wall 12 feet high, the men boosted each other up with ease. When it was Maya's turn, nobody offered a hand. She backed up, took a running start, and jumped. Her fingers caught the top edge. She pulled herself up with pure arm strength, her muscles screaming, and rolled over the top. By the time she dropped down on the other side, the squad was already moving. "Keep up, Reeves," Brennan shouted without looking back. She ran harder. The next objective was a simulated minefield. They had to cross it using only the tools they carried: rope, stakes, and their training. Brennan assigned roles quickly. Mills, you're on point. Chen, security. Palmer, you're with me on the rope. Reeves, he looked at her like she was an afterthought. Stay out of the way. Maya felt the anger rise hot in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She moved to the perimeter and took a security position, scanning the tree line while the others worked. They crossed the minefield in 8 minutes. Fast. Clean. But Maya had barely contributed. The third objective changed everything. They were moving through a simulated village when the enemy ambush hit. Blank rounds cracked through the air. Smoke grenades detonated. Instructors in opposing force uniforms appeared from behind buildings, shouting and firing. Contact left, Brennan roared. Suppressive fire. Move, move, move. The squad returned fire and pushed forward, using cover and movement like they'd been trained. Maya stayed with them, her rifle barking, her feet moving on instinct. Then she heard it. A shout. A crash. Specialist Mills went down hard, clutching his leg. In the simulation, he'd just been hit by enemy fire. But the way he was grimacing, something else was wrong. I'm down, Mills yelled. My ankle, I think it's broken. Maya didn't hesitate. She broke from cover and sprinted toward him, keeping low. Rounds snapped overhead. Blanks, but loud enough to make her heart pound. She reached Mills and dropped beside him. His face was twisted in pain and his ankle was already swelling, bent at an ugly angle. I got you, Maya said. She slung her rifle and grabbed him under the arms. Mills was 180, maybe 190, 50 pounds heavier than her. She didn't care. She pulled him up and draped his arm over her shoulders, taking his weight. He hobbled on one leg, and she half-dragged, half-carried him toward cover. Reeves, what are you doing? Brennan's voice cut through the chaos. Casualty evacuation, Staff Sergeant, she shouted back. Leave him. We need to complete the objective. Maya ignored him. She kept moving, her legs burning, her lungs screaming. Mills groaned with every step, his weight threatening to pull them both down. But she held on. She got him behind a concrete barrier and set him down as gently as she could. Then she grabbed her rifle and returned to the fight. The squad secured the objective 90 seconds later. When the smoke cleared and the exercise ended, Hayes walked through the village, clipboard in hand, evaluating performance. He stopped in front of Maya. You broke formation, he said. I evacuated a casualty, sir, Maya replied. You abandoned the objective. I saved a soldier's life, sir. Hayes stared at her for a long moment. Behind him, Mills was being loaded onto a stretcher by the medics. His ankle was definitely broken, a real injury in the middle of a simulation. In combat, Hayes said slowly, sometimes you have to make hard choices. Sometimes the mission comes first. With respect, sir, Maya said, her voice steady. The mission is nothing if we don't bring our people home. For the first time since she'd met him, Hayes didn't have a comeback. He wrote something on his clipboard and walked away. That night in the barracks, Maya sat on her bunk, exhausted and sore. Her shoulders ached from carrying Mills. Her hands were blistered from the rope work. Her feet throbbed, but she'd done it. She'd proven again that she belonged. Then Brennan walked in. He stopped in front of her bunk, his massive frame blocking out the light. You think you're a hero? He said quietly. Maya looked up at him. No, Staff Sergeant. You think saving Mills makes you one of us? I think doing my job makes me a soldier, Staff Sergeant. Brennan leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. Listen to me, Reeves. When we get to Afghanistan, it's not going to be a training exercise. It's going to be real bullets, real blood, real death. And when the shooting starts, I don't want to be wondering if the person next to me can handle it. He straightened up. You're a distraction. You're a weakness. And if you get someone killed, over there because you couldn't pull your weight, that blood's on you. He walked away, leaving Maya sitting in the dim light, her fists clenched so tight her nails dug into her palms. She wanted to scream, she wanted to cry, she wanted to quit. But she didn't do any of those things. Instead, she lay back on her bunk, stared at the ceiling, and made herself a promise. When they got to Afghanistan, she would prove them all wrong, no matter what it took. 2 weeks later, Bravo Company boarded a transport plane at Pope Army Airfield. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Maya sat in the webbed seat, her rifle between her knees, her helmet resting beside her. Around her, the men talked in low voices, some excited, some nervous, some silent. She was silent too. As the plane's engines roared to life and they lifted into the sky, Maya looked out the small window at Fort Bragg disappearing below. Somewhere in the distance was her hometown. Her family. Her little sister who looked up to her like she was invincible. Maya didn't feel invincible. She felt alone. But as the plane climbed higher and turned east toward the war, she set her jaw and made that promise again. She would prove them wrong. She just didn't know yet how high the cost would be. Forward operating base. Wolverine sat in the dust and heat of Kandahar province like a scar on the earth. It was surrounded by blast walls, razor wire, and guard towers. Beyond the perimeter lay miles of brown rocky terrain dotted with villages that may or may not be friendly. The mountains rose in the distance, ancient and unforgiving, hiding threats in every shadow. Maya had been in Afghanistan for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of 100-degree heat and choking dust. 6 weeks of standing guard, running patrols, and waiting for something to happen. 6 weeks of living in a plywood box, eating food from plastic bags, and trying to sleep through the sound of distant gunfire. 6 weeks of still being treated like she didn't belong. Bravo Company had been assigned to security operations, protecting convoys, securing villages, and hunting down insurgent cells. It was dangerous work. 2 weeks after they arrived, an IED hit a convoy from Alpha Company. 3 soldiers died, 5 more were wounded. The war was real here. The enemy was real, and Maya was ready. But Captain Hayes still kept her on the sidelines. While other squad members rotated through point positions and leadership roles, Maya was assigned rear security. While others planned operations, she pulled guard duty. While others got combat experience, she watched from behind. "You need to earn it," Hayes told her when she questioned the assignments. "I've earned it, sir," she replied. "Not here, you haven't." It was Brennan who made it crystal clear. They were sitting in the Tactical Operations Center one evening, planning the next day's patrol through a village called Jure. Intelligence suggested an insurgent weapons cache was hidden there. Maya was part of the briefing, but only barely. She sat in the back while Brennan ran through the plan with the squad leaders. "We go in at first light," Brennan said, pointing at the map. 2 vehicles. First squad clears the north side. Second squad takes the south. We find the cache, we secure it, we call for disposal. In and out, no contact if we can avoid it. "What about local engagement?" Maya asked from the back. Brennan didn't even look at her. "What about it? If we want cooperation, we should have someone talking to the village elder, building rapport. Going in aggressive might what, Reeves?" Brennan cut her off. "Might hurt their feelings?" A few of the men chuckled. Maya felt her face flush. "Might make them less likely to give us intel, Staff Sergeant." "I've been running operations in this country for 3 tours, Brennan said, finally turning to look at her. "I don't need advice from someone who's been here 6 weeks. Hayes, standing in the corner, said nothing. Maya swallowed her anger and stayed quiet for the rest of the briefing. The patrol went out the next morning. Maya was assigned to the second vehicle, rear security. She sat in the back of the armored truck, watching the landscape roll by through the dust-caked window. The gunner stood above her in the turret, scanning for threats. The village of Jure appeared like a mirage. Mud brick buildings clustered together, narrow streets, children playing in the dirt. It looked peaceful, but Maya's instincts were screaming. They dismounted and moved through the village in formation. The locals watched them with dark, unreadable eyes. Old men sat in doorways. Women pulled children inside. Dogs barked in the distance. Maya's finger rested alongside the trigger guard of her rifle. Not on the trigger, not yet, but ready. Brennan led first squad into a compound on the north side. Second squad, led by Sergeant Chen, moved south. Maya stayed with Chen's team, covering their rear as they cleared buildings one by one. Then the radio crackled. "Contact! Contact north." Brennan's voice was tight with adrenaline. "We've got fighters in the compound." "Taking fire!" The crack of gunfire echoed through the village. Second squad, move to support. Hayes ordered over the radio. Chen's squad broke into a run. Maya ran with them, her boots pounding the dirt, her heart hammering in her chest. They rounded a corner and saw it, the compound where Brennan's squad was pinned down. Muzzle flashes sparked from the rooftop and windows. Rounds kicked up dirt in the street. Suppressive fire, Chen shouted. Maya dropped to one knee behind a low wall and brought her rifle up. She aimed at the rooftop, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. 3-round burst. Adjust. 3-round burst. Her rifle barked in her hands, the recoil familiar and manageable. Brass casings ejected and tumbled into the dust beside her. She saw one of the fighters on the roof drop. Moving, Chen yelled, and part of the squad advanced while Maya and 2 others laid down covering fire. The firefight lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of chaos and noise and the smell of gunpowder and fear. When it was over, 4 insurgents were dead. Bravo Company had 0 casualties. As the adrenaline faded and the soldiers secured the compound, Maya stood near the wall, her hand still steady on her rifle, her breathing coming back to normal. Brennan walked past her without a word. No acknowledgement. No thanks for the covering fire that helped them advance. Nothing. But Specialist Chen stopped beside her. Good shooting, Reeves, he said quietly. It was the first compliment she'd received from anyone in the company. Thanks, Sergeant, she replied. He nodded and walked away, leaving her standing there with the smallest spark of hope warming her chest. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to prove herself. The operation continued. They found the weapons cache buried beneath a false floor in one of the buildings. AK-47s, ammunition, RPG rounds, and explosives. Enough to supply a small army. Hayes called it a success. That night, back at the FOB, the men celebrated. They gathered in the common area, sharing stories, laughing about the close calls, replaying the firefight like it was a football game. Maya sat outside alone, cleaning her rifle under the stars. She could hear them inside. Heard Brennan's voice louder than the rest, telling the story of how he'd spotted the fighters first, how he'd called the contact, how his squad held the line. No mention of second squad support, no mention of Maya's shots. She told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't here for recognition. She was here to serve, but it still hurt. 2 weeks later, the mission came that would change everything. Intelligence reported a high-value target in a village 12 miles north of the FOB, a Taliban commander responsible for multiple attacks on coalition forces. The orders came down from battalion: capture or kill. It was a night raid. Fast, dangerous, high risk. Hayes assembled the team personally. Brennan would lead the assault element. Chen would command the support team. They'd go in with 2 helicopters, hit the target building, and extract before the enemy could organize a response. Maya was in the common area when she heard Hayes reading off the roster. She waited for her name. It didn't come. Sir, she said, stepping forward. Request permission to join the assault team. Hayes looked at her like she'd just asked to fly the helicopter. Denied. Sir, I've proven I can. I said denied, Sergeant. This is a direct action mission. I need my best people on it. The implication hung in the air like smoke. You're not one of my best people. Maya felt something crack inside her chest. With respect, sir, I've completed every mission. I've performed under fire. Reeves! Hayes's voice was hard as steel. Stand down. That's an order. She stood there, every muscle in her body screaming to argue, to fight, to demand the respect she'd earned, but orders were orders. Yes, sir, she said quietly. She turned and walked out of the room, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Behind her, she heard Brennan's voice, low but audible. Dodged a bullet there, sir. Last thing we need is dead weight on a mission like this. Several men laughed. Maya kept walking. She walked past the barracks, past the chow hall, all the way to the perimeter wall. She stood there in the darkness, staring out at the empty desert, her hands clenched into fists. She'd done everything right, everything they'd asked, and it still wasn't enough. For the first time since she'd joined the army, Maya wondered if they were right. Maybe she didn't belong. Maybe she was kidding herself. No. She straightened her shoulders and took a deep breath. She wasn't going to quit. She wasn't going to break. If they wouldn't give her a chance, she'd force them to see her somehow. The assault team left at 0200 hours. Maya watched from the operations center as the helicopters lifted off into the night, their running lights disappearing into the darkness. She sat in front of the radio, monitoring the mission frequency even though she wasn't part of it. She heard them hit the target, heard the gunfire over the radio, heard Brennan's voice calling out commands, confident and strong. Then she heard the words that made her blood run cold. "We're taking heavy fire. Multiple shooters. We need immediate extract. Bird 1 is hit. We're going down." And then through the static and chaos, Brennan's voice again, but different now, raw and desperate. "Man down. Man down, Hayes is hit. I repeat, Captain Hayes is down and we need medevac now." Maya was on her feet before she even realized she was moving. The war had just become personal, and everything was about to change. The operations center erupted into controlled chaos. Radios crackled with overlapping voices. Officers shouted orders. Maps were pulled up on screens showing the crash site location. Maya stood frozen for only a second. Then her training kicked in. "Sir," she called to the lieutenant coordinating the response. "I can go." "Let me go." Lieutenant Morrison barely glanced at her. "We're assembling a quick reaction force. It'll take 15 minutes to They don't have 15 minutes. Maya cut him off, her voice sharp. "That helo went down in hostile territory. Every second we wait, the enemy is moving in." Morrison hesitated. Over the radio, Brennan's voice came through again, strained and tight. "We've got wounded. Hayes is critical. We're pinned down and running low on ammo. Where's our support?" Maya stepped closer to Morrison, her eyes blazing. "Sir, I know that terrain. I studied every map, every route. I can take a vehicle and be there in 10 minutes, please." Morrison looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the determination in her eyes, the readiness. "Take a driver and a gunner," he said. "Go." Maya didn't wait for him to change his mind. She sprinted out of the operations center, grabbed her gear and rallied the 2 closest soldiers she could find. Private First Class Davis, a kid from Ohio who could drive anything with wheels, and Corporal Jackson, a solid gunner with steady hands. "Load up," Maya ordered. "We've got friendlies down and we're bringing them home." 3 minutes later, they were racing through the darkness in an armored Humvee, the engine roaring, dust billowing behind them. Davis drove like a man possessed, the headlights cutting through the night. Jackson manned the machine gun in the turret, scanning for threats. Maya sat in the passenger seat, her rifle ready, her heart pounding but her mind clear. The radio crackled in her ear. "Reeves, be advised, you're heading into an active combat zone. Enemy fighters are converging on the crash site." "Copy that," Maya replied. "We're not stopping." The landscape flew by in a blur of shadows and rocks. In the distance she could see smoke rising, the downed helicopter burning, and then she saw the muzzle flashes. "Contact ahead." Jackson called from the turret. "Punch through," Maya shouted to Davis. The Humvee accelerated. Rounds pinged off the armored hull. Jackson opened up with the 50 cal, the heavy machine gun roaring. Red tracers cutting through the darkness. They crashed through a low fence and skidded to a stop 50 meters from the crash site. Maya threw open the door and rolled out, immediately taking cover behind the vehicle. Davis and Jackson were right behind her. Ahead she could see the helicopter, its rotors bent and broken, smoke pouring from the engine. Around it, Brennan's team had formed a defensive perimeter, but they were badly outnumbered, and in the center, lying motionless on the ground, was Captain Hayes. "Covering fire," Maya ordered. Jackson swung the turret and laid down suppressive fire. Maya and Davis moved forward in a low run, using every bit of cover they could find. Bullets cracked past Maya's head. She felt the heat of them, heard the supersonic snap, but she didn't stop. She reached the perimeter and dove behind a piece of wreckage. Brennan was there, his face streaked with blood and dirt, his eyes wide with shock. "Reeves, what the hell are you—" "Where's Hayes?" Maya demanded. Brennan pointed. 30 feet away, Hayes lay on his back. 2 soldiers crouched over him, trying to stop the bleeding. His leg was a mess of blood and torn fabric. "He took shrapnel from the crash," Brennan said, his voice hollow. "Severed his femoral artery. We can't move him. If we do, he'll bleed out before we get him to a medevac." Maya looked at the captain. Even from here she could see he was dying. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. "We don't have a choice," Maya said. "If we stay here, we all die. That compound," she pointed to a structure 100 meters away. We get to cover we can hold until the QRF arrives. He won't make it, Brennan said. There was defeat in his voice. Surrender. Maya grabbed him by the vest and pulled him close, her eyes fierce. I'm not leaving him. I'm not leaving anyone. Now lay down covering fire or get out of my way. For a moment, Brennan just stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression. He nodded. On my mark, Brennan shouted to the team. Suppressing fire! Give Reeves cover. The soldiers opened up with everything they had. Rifle fire, machine gun bursts, grenades. The enemy fighters ducked behind cover. Maya ran. She sprinted across open ground, her legs pumping, her lungs burning. Rounds kicked up dirt at her feet. Something tugged at her sleeve. A bullet passing so close it tore the fabric. She didn't stop. She reached Hayes and dropped to her knees beside him. The medic looked up at her, his face desperate. I can't stop the bleeding. He needs surgery. I've got him, Maya said. She pulled out a tourniquet from her kit and cinched it high on Hayes' thigh above the wound. Hayes groaned, barely conscious. Stay with me, sir, Maya said. I'm getting you out of here. Hayes' eyes flickered open. He looked at her, recognition slowly dawning. Reeves? Yes, sir. I've got you. She slung her rifle across her back, then grabbed Hayes and pulled him up into a fireman's carry. 210 pounds of dead weight settled onto her shoulders. Her knees almost buckled. Every muscle in her body screamed. But she locked her legs, set her jaw and started moving, one step then another. The compound was 100 meters away. It might as well have been 100 miles. Move, move! Brennan was shouting, laying down covering fire with his rifle. Maya stumbled forward, her boots digging into the dirt. Hayes' weight pressed down on her shoulders like a mountain. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel. Her breath came in ragged gasps. 50 meters. A bullet snapped past her ear. 40 meters. Her leg almost gave out, but she caught herself. 30 meters. Come on, Reeves. Davis was screaming from somewhere. You got this. 20 meters, her shoulders were on fire. Her legs were numb. Sweat poured into her eyes. But she could see the compound entrance. Just a little farther. 10 meters. Hayes mumbled something she couldn't understand. She felt his blood soaking through her uniform. Stay with me, sir, she gasped. Don't you dare quit on me. 5 meters. Strong hands reached out and grabbed Hayes, pulling him off her shoulders. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, her entire body shaking. They were inside. They'd made it. Chen pulled her to her feet. You crazy, stubborn? He was grinning. That was the gutsiest thing I've ever seen. Brennan was there too, staring at her with something like wonder in his eyes. The QRF is 2 minutes out, he said quietly. You just saved his life. Maya couldn't speak. She just nodded and slumped against the wall, trying to catch her breath. The next 2 minutes felt like 2 hours. They held the compound, fighting off probing attacks until finally they heard the beautiful sound of helicopter rotors. The quick reaction force arrived with 2 Blackhawks and overwhelming firepower. The enemy fighters scattered. The medevac team rushed in, loaded Hayes onto a stretcher and worked on him with practiced efficiency. Before they carried him to the helicopter, Hayes grabbed Maya's hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were clear. Thank you, he whispered. Maya squeezed his hand. Just doing my job, sir. A ghost of a smile crossed his pale face. No, you did more than that. Then they were lifting him away, loading him onto the bird, and the helicopter was rising into the pre-dawn sky, carrying him to safety. 3 weeks later, forward operating base. Wolverine Maya stood at attention in the same courtyard where she'd spent so many mornings being doubted and dismissed. But everything was different now. The entire company was assembled. Soldiers from other units too. Even the battalion commander had come, and they were all there for her. Captain Hayes stood at the front leaning on a cane, his legs still bandaged but healing. He'd survived the surgery. The doctor said if Maya had been even 3 minutes slower, he would have bled out in the field. 3 minutes. That's how close it had been. Hayes stepped forward, his voice strong despite his injury. Sergeant Maya Reeves, he began, and his voice carried across the silent courtyard. On the night of October 15th, you displayed courage and selflessness beyond measure. When others said it was impossible, you proved them wrong. When the situation was hopeless, you gave us hope. You ran into enemy fire and carried a wounded soldier to safety, saving his life at great risk to your own. He paused, And Maya saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Respect. True, earned respect. "I was wrong about you," Hayes said quietly, just loud enough for the front rows to hear. "I doubted you. I questioned whether you belonged. I made you prove yourself again and again when I should have trusted you from the start." He cleared his throat, his voice growing louder again. "For your actions, you are hereby awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in combat." The courtyard erupted in applause. Hayes pinned the medal to her chest, then stepped back and saluted her. She returned the salute, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall. Not yet. When the formation was dismissed, the soldiers surrounded her, shaking her hand, clapping her shoulder, welcoming her not as an outsider, but as one of them, as family. Brennan was the last to approach. The big staff sergeant stood in front of her, and for a long moment he just looked at her. Then he extended his hand. "I was wrong," he said simply, "about everything. You're not a weakness. You're one of the strongest soldiers I've ever served with." Maya shook his hand. "Thank you, Staff Sergeant." "It's Kyle," he said. "And if I ever go into combat again, I'd be honored to have you watching my back." Later that evening, Maya sat alone on the perimeter wall, watching the sun set over the mountains of Afghanistan. The medal was heavy on her chest, but it wasn't the weight of metal she felt. It was the weight of proving finally that she belonged. Her phone buzzed with a message that had been relayed through military email. It was from her little sister back home. "I saw the news. Everyone's talking about you. You're a hero. I always knew you were. I'm so proud of you." Maya smiled and typed back, "Not a hero. Just a soldier. Love you." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Maya heard footsteps behind her. Chen sat down beside her, handing her a bottle of water. "How's it feel?" he asked. "How's what feel?" "Being right. Proving all of them wrong." Maya thought about it. About all the doubt, the mockery, the loneliness, about the moment she'd lifted Hayes onto her shoulders and refused to quit. "It doesn't feel like I proved them wrong," she said finally. "It feels like I proved myself right. I always knew what I was capable of. I just had to show them." Chen nodded. "Well, you showed them all right." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of helicopters taking off echoed across the base. The war continued. The mission continued. And Maya Reeves, the soldier they'd called too weak for combat, was ready for whatever came next, because she'd learned something in that desperate run through enemy. Fire strength isn't about how much you can lift. It's about what you refuse to put down, and she'd carried that truth, along with Captain Hayes, all the way home.